On the flip side, suppose the user does not give us a JSON object with in his request, right? So this code won't run. But the benefit of try block again here is that if the code doesn't run, the program doesn't crash, the program doesn't exit, it finds that this is not going to work, so it moves to the except block. So there's many ways you can specify an error for an exception for an except block, so on and so forth. But in our case, in the except block, we're creating exception as any error, right? So that if any error pops up, we would raise an exception and we'll just return a JSONify or JSON object with the error name and a 400 status code. So again, here we're using a JSONify object to make sure that any return value that we communicate with the requesting user is in JSON as a JSON object, and we're returning an error with the actual name of what that error was in string form. And 400 status code means that the request was a bad request or didn't work out. So I mean, basically, yeah, it was a bad request. So the application did not work as it should, and the request was not successful. So that is basically the entire logic for the rounding up feature. This piece of code here is just to make sure that you run your Flask object, right? This makes sure that your Flask object is run when we run the simple Flask run command on Flask. Now, before running that, we need to open the terminal. And, I think we need to basically create a virtual environment first, because like that's the best practice in how you develop applications, because it creates a silo independent of your main environment where you can install or delete any application that you need to run that particular piece of code. Instead, for example, in some applications, you might need to delete some sort of package which might be in your central database. So instead of delete, and then that package might be required by other applications. So instead of deleting in your central central environment, you just create a virtual environment and just install the packages you need to run that program in a virtual environment. So we're going to install that. Let me check the exact library that we use for the virtual environment. All right, the virtual environment is set up. We use the Python command here to make sure that the Linux terminal knows that we're working. This is a Python related command. And then we use -m when v myenv. Myenv is just the name of the virtual environment. So, you can name it anything. When v is the package that we are using to create the virtual environment. So it takes a little bit time to install. Now that it's installed, we use the source command. And again, I'm using the Linux terminal. So these are Linux commands. If you're working with PowerShell or any other shell to run your programs, you might want to look up the exact commands for that using ChatGPT, or just looking up the documentation or doing a Google search. So now to activate the virtual environment, we use source myenv bin activate. Once we run this command, now we're inside the virtual environment. You can know you're in the virtual environment when you see the name of your virtual environment, right in brackets, right at the start of your Linux terminal. And I think that's true for most other shells as well. So now we just use the simple command called Flask run to make sure that our application is running. So now that the application is running, now we need to basically send in a request. Let me actually show you something to show you basically that this Flask application, although it's on the internet, won't run because we did not allow, like, first of all, we haven't defined this route, but even if we go to the defined route, which is roundup, you'll find this method is not allowed. So people cannot work with this API endpoint or this route because we have not allowed people to access any this particular route with anything other than a post method. And this usually means that they need to post some sort of information for us to respond back with a certain information back to them. Now, to test this API, you can use Postman or any other application, but rather Postman or any other Linux command. In our case, we're just going to use basically curl and just run a simple command. I mean, you can use ChatGPT to basically get these exact terminal-based commands, but Postman is much simpler in getting things done. So we're going to use the curl command here. And if you pay attention to the command that we send, we use curl to post a command to content type application /JSON. And we would again the request we sent is with a JSON object which defines an amount along with what that amount is, right? So that means we've sent in the correct information to the API endpoint for it to process that. If we send this to this API, this IP address, which is the API endpoint, and this is the response that we're getting back. So if you look closely, we get an original amount that we get in the response JSON file. We have the original amount 4.35, and you see if we go back, if we look at our main code, that's how the JSON object should return the amount, original amount, and amount. Then we have the rounded up amount, which is here with the value of 5. So basically, we sent the amount 4.35 to this API endpoint. It rounded that amount up to 5. And the difference between the rounded up amount and the original amount is 0.65, which we see it in the rounded up value here. So now basically we have so, we have sorted out, we have seen that this application gives us the correct response. One thing of note here is that I just saw that and I wanted to make sure that, I explain why that could potentially happen. If you see here, right at the end of these long digits of response, you have a 4, which doesn't make any sense because 6.5 is the exact difference between the rounded up amount and the original amount. But, computer has a certain amount of memory allocations. And when we exceed that number of memory allocations, it shows us garbage values. And this is a sort of a garbage value. So one of the best practices would be to limit the amount of decimal places that you need to, that you go to basically in, in calculating certain amounts. So if we limited this amount, it would, to like 2 or 3 decimal places, it's going to round that up and remain, it would give us a very accurate approximation. But if we expand out the number of, or if we don't limit that, basically we'll start getting garbage values after a certain amount of, decimal places. So that was how you can implement a simple rounding up API endpoint on Flask. And before I think we wrap up this video, George, do you have something to add?
No, I mean, the only thing that I want to say is that this is, and excuse me, I'm like I'm catching a cold, but excuse my 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 voice. But the only thing that I really want to say is that you know, let's work to maybe kind of build up this application, right? Or this script. Let's possibly think about building it into a larger application, and and get some functionality, because I can see a lot of things that I can do with this. And thank you. If you like the video, please like and subscribe to the channel. We're going to be working on more content like this. and just kind of help us out with the algorithm. Definitely comment in the comment section, in terms of any type of videos that you all want to see created, because we're here to basically simplify, for individuals. We're not here to obfuscate. We're not here to, to make things difficult. And I think I think that's it, Muhammad.
And yep, I think with that we can wrap up our video, and we will see you all in our next video.